Matters of Public Importance on Channel 6. I'm yours, Gail Teixeira, Parliamentary Opposition Chief Whip, representing the People's Progressive Party, civic members of Parliament, and the People's Progressive Party. On this program, we shall focus on matters of public importance, bring you information and discussions on issues and matters that are concerned to you, the Guyanese public, every Thursday between 12:30 and 1:30, right here on Channel 6. Well, welcome to our 46th program since we started, and our very first program for 2017. I wish all of you and your loved ones the best for the new year, even though we predicted that this year, 2017, will be a rough ride for our people and the nation. Before we get into the meat of our program, let me remind you of the telephone numbers that you can use to call in when we start taking calls, 225-0010 and 225-0008. And of course, I always remind you that the Leader Opposition Office on 304 Church Street between Newmarket and Peter Rose is open Monday to Saturday between 9 o'clock and 5:30, sometimes later. And you're welcome to pop in and discuss matters of concern to you, things that are worrying you, as well as asking to get assistance with representation. The number there, 225-3432. 225-3432. Remember 32, the last two digits are the same as the number of members of Parliament for the PPC in the Parliament. Each week I also remind you about Freedom Radio that we have that broadcasts on 91.1 Demerara, 90.5 Berbice, and 90.7 Essequibo. And we hope you will listen to the programs there, because those are very interesting programs that run from morning to evening and have a variety of programs: political, educational, women, youth, farmers, inspirational, and so on. So welcome to join us. Well, today, for our very first program for 2017, I have on the program former Attorney General and Minister of Legal Affairs and presently Parliamentary Sectoral Spokesperson on Constitutional and Legal Matters. And that, of course, is MP Anil Nandlall. Thank you, Anil, for coming to our program. Our viewers know Mr. Nandlall. He's been on this program several times. So welcome again, and thank you for coming on our program.
Thank you.
I just want to wrap up, Anil, the first last couple of days of December, the first couple of days of January, what it's been like, and then we can get into our discussion, which I know you feel very passionately about. The last few days of the 2016 and the 11 days of this new year have certainly been eventful and full of surprises. When we finished our last program for 2016 on December 29th, little did we know that that very evening we would learn that the President would officially inform the GECOM Research Centre Board that he had revoked the lease for the property, and further that they had until Saturday, December 31st, to vacate the premises. Little did we know that on the following day, staff from the Ministry of the Presidency would be sent to Red House to repossess the property, and ended up vandalizing the sign on the building, while at the same time, coincidentally, the Chief Justice acting was hearing the arguments led by lawyers for Red House, Anil Nandlall, Priya Manik-Chan, and the Attorney General, Mr. Williams, for the government. Even more surprises were in store when a peaceful candlelight vigil in support of Red House, remaining as the GECOM Research Centre, was held that same evening, Friday, December the 30th. And lo and behold, along comes the Minister of Social Protection, Mrs. Valda Lawrence, with a few noisy supporters, one of whom, by the way, is an RDC Region 4 councillor, and one who also appears to be working very closely with the minister, maybe is in an advisory position. And they held a counter vigil against us, that is, calling for Red House to be dedicated to all the former presidents. And some of we have videos that have been posted on various Facebooks of what transpired. So let's dissect these developments. Can you imagine the PP holding a counter activity, the PNC or PNC government, as at the same time that they're having theirs? Certainly this will be confrontational. Remember, during the PNC reign of 28 years, they gave themselves lots of land and properties without a lease. For example, the huge land allocated to the PNC headquarters in Sophia. It's an enormous piece of property. I'm sure you know what that is, where that is. And some of which have recently been sold. Parts of it have been sold over the years. The land for the former vice president and widow of Forbes Burnham in Durban Backlands, that is, the property that became Mrs. Viola Burnham. The property that was sold, this is the third property, that was sold for a song to a PNC minister in the Bel Air Gardens, who is now a minister in this government and vice president, one of the vice presidents. The land that the former leader of the opposition and executive member of the PNC owns on the Demerara River opposite Linden, again an enormous tract of land. Land to former members of the PNC also in areas of Region 10, just to name some key ones. These weren't leased lands. These were given to them, sold at either dirt price pieces or just handed over by diktat. The PPC, on coming to government, did not revoke any of these sales and agreements. Note that. Very, very important point. Thirdly, they're quarreling about a lease of 99 years for Red House, where there's a board which is legitimate and is the custodian of Chetty Jagan's writings and artifacts. If they thought the amount paid was too low, they could have negotiated a new rate. However, they fully know that leased land in Guyana is cheap. 4. But is this all about just legal arguments they put forward, or is it about bald-faced bullyism and showing their might? You know my answer. Then we were greeted as the year changed with some more surprises. The reshuffle of cabinet when a month ago the president asserted that there would be none. He was satisfied with his minister's performance. So here we go again, what I called in June 2016 the waltz of the ministers, to and fro, moving between an amount and to different ministries. In other words, recycling incompetence and ineptitude. As if that was enough, then we had the parliamentary sittings on January 5th and 6th, where the 12 bills and 3 affirmative motions to bring into effect the new tax measures. Remember, I said that in 10 months this government had imposed 200 new taxation measures on the Guyanese people, 143 in the 2016 budget and 57 in the 2017 budget. We argued as the opposition vociferously against these taxes and gave reasons why. The government was not swayed by any of these arguments that we put on behalf of the people of our nation. We even brought amendments to 2 bills. Both were rejected outright and voted down. One of these called for the removal of VAT on electricity and water. Can you imagine that? They wouldn't even concede on something like that. Then the order number 18 of 2016, which removes items that were formerly zero rated to exempt status, requires a negative motion to be debated. So we've tabled one, calling for the reinstatement of all the zero rated items. This motion has a life of 40 days and therefore would have to be debated by January the 28th, 2017. True to form, the APNU AFC government refused to uphold the Interpretation and General Clauses Act and the standing orders and call a sitting before that date. Predictably, they've set the date for January 30th for the next sitting. And by the way, we hear a rumor that once again the president will be coming to address the nation on an opposition day, because the next sitting is our day. The Speaker has agreed to examine the matter of this violation, basically, I call it violation, of the standing orders and the law, and he will advise on a course of action. Of course, you know me, I'm not holding my breath on this one. Next, we have the famous annual media end-of-year brunch at State House, where the President announced that he's rejecting the list of 6 nominees submitted by the Leader of the Opposition, Honorable Barra Jack Deo, on the grounds that the Constitution requires that the nominees be judges or persons with legal backgrounds. This was an extraordinary setting for such a public pronouncement by a President, without having the decency or the courtesy to first officially inform the Leader of the Opposition. It is an extraordinary pronouncement by the President in contravention of the Article 161(2) of the Constitution and the practice of the last 26 years with regard to the nomination and selection of the Chairman of the Guyana Elections Commission. So, Anil, I just wanted to give a quick wrap-up of the last 2 weeks since our last program, so I know that you're anxious to also talk about, and I thought that as we have a younger generation as well, how did we come to this formula, what was called the Carter Center, introduced in 91 and later on became constitutionalized and everything. I don't know if you want to give that little background for the younger listeners on our program.
All right. I want to begin, Gail, by echoing your best wishes to the public out there for the year 2017, while at the same time recognizing the challenges that we know the population will be confronted with in 2017. And I want to make the point as well that we began 2016, or rather 2015 ended almost the same way that 2016 ended. And that is, we saw gross violation of the law. In 2015, the last few days, we witnessed the spectacle of a Soku officer who happened to be a member of the Guyana Defense Force following someone in a car in a surreptitious manner in what was obviously an unlawful and illegal chase operations, which resulted in the death of 4 persons, I think, or 2 persons.
3.
3 persons. That happened on the eve of the beginning of 2016. On the eve of the beginning of 2017, we witnessed the shocking revocation, unlawful revocation, or purported revocation of a 99-year lease by the president.
Yeah.
A lease that was issued by the Guyana Lands and Surveys Commission. The president takes over the powers of the Guyana Lands and Surveys Commission, and he revokes a lease instantly without complying with the terms of the lease that speak to revocation. Every one of you out there who may have entered into a landlord and tenant arrangement would know that the contract normally provides for how it is to be terminated. It is to be invariably, the contract will say that it is to be terminated in writing by giving a period of notice to the lessee or the tenant. And also, the landlord is supposed to cite the basis upon which he is terminating the lease. A lease is not terminable just like that, because a lease is a contract. And once the tenant obeys the terms and conditions of the lease, then the landlord power to terminate is held in abeyance. All of that was thrown through the window. All the legal principles were thrown through the window, and we have a president in true authoritarian style decides to defeat the protection that the law accords to a tenant and unilaterally and for no reason revoke a lease 99 years in length immediately and gives 48 hours notice to the tenant to be evicted from the demised or the rented premises. Every aspect of it is in violation of the law, and the entire saga is contrary to the rule of law, which says that we must behave in accordance with the laws of the land, and no one is above the law or is accorded any unequal treatment by law. Everyone must follow the same legal process in terms of getting remedies from the court. So here it is, the ordinary tenant or the ordinary landlord has to go through the legal procedure of serving a notice, giving the required time under the lease for the tenant to vacate the premises, and if the tenant fails to do so, that landlord is required to go to the court and get an order of possession, and then when that order of possession is gotten, it is served on the tenant, and even then, if the tenant refuses to remove, then the landlord has to go back to the court to get what is called an order of ejectment, and the application for the order of ejectment is required to be served on the tenant, and the tenant is required to come to court again and say why he should not be ejected, though a possession order would have already been made against him. And only when that ejectment warrant is granted, then a bailiff of the magistrate court goes and physically evict the tenant. So you have a scheme of protection that is in the law that protects the tenant from arbitrary and capricious eviction by a landlord. This president believes, obviously, that he's not bound by the laws of the land, and he doesn't have to go through that procedure. And therefore, he revokes this lease. And that is the most gross violation of the rule of law in recent times in the Caribbean. I don't think one can cite a more contumacious act of disregard for the rule of law by any head of state in the Caribbean over the last 10 to 15 years. So I wanted to begin by just getting those issues out.
Yeah, I'm glad you explained that to our viewers.
And then, Gail, to come to your point about how the Carter formula came about. And coincidentally, I worked with the 1980 Constitution. Because prior to the Carter formula, what governed the country in terms of how the chairman of the Elections Commission was appointed was the 1980 Constitution. And the then Article 161(2) of the 1980 Constitution reads as follows: subject to the provisions of paragraph 6, and paragraph 6 says that the chairman of the Elections Commission must be a Guyanese. So, subject to the provisions of paragraph 6, the chairman of the Elections Commission shall be appointed by the president from among persons who hold or have held office as a judge of a court having unlimited jurisdiction in civil and criminal matters in some part of the Commonwealth, or a court having jurisdiction in appeals from any such court, or who are qualified to be appointed as any such judge. So this is what the position was before the Carter formula. Two things stand out here.
Right.
That is different from now, that are different from the current position. One is that the president had the power to unilaterally make the appointment.
Exactly.
That the leader of the opposition had no role whatsoever in the appointment of the chairman.
That's right.
And two, the qualifications for the chairman at that time was a judge, a former judge, or a person qualified to be a judge. So that was the setting prior to the Carter formula. And Gail, you were around that time. You know that you and other leaders of the party at the time, led by Comrade Chetty, waged a tremendous national and international campaign to bring electoral reforms before the 92 elections were to be held. Among the reforms that were secured or were successful in achieving was a reform of the electoral laws, in particular the Constitution, in respect of how the commission is going to be constituted and how the chairman is going to be appointed. And what President Jimmy Carter did was to create a formula that was to ensure that there were balance between the political parties in terms of how the commission is going to be constituted, and also consensus in terms of how the chairman was going to be appointed. So in terms of the commission itself, the Carter formula prescribes that 3 commissioners must come from the governing party and 3 commissioners from the opposition party. All the opposition parties in the parliament at the time. And then in terms of the appointment of the chairman, the Carter formula was widened to include persons other than judges, former judges, and persons qualified to be judges. And the Constitution, President Hoyt agreed to the formula.
Yes.
And the Constitution was temporarily suspended and changes made to it to accommodate the reforms. And that is how Dr. Jagan, being leader of the opposition, submitted in a list of names which included that of Ambassador Rudy Collins, and President Hoyt appointed Rudy Collins.
Yeah.
At that time, the fit and proper formula, in the words fit and proper, was not used as yet. It was used for the first time for the local government elections of 1994. In 1993, after the 92 elections, the changes which were made in the Constitution expired because they were only, what you call it, sunset type of changes, just to meet that
And which,
eventuality.
by the way, Chetty had to agree with as the leader of the opposition, or to have the required amount of votes in the House in
Right,
1990,
right,
and then it
yes.
was done again in 91.
That's correct. So for the 94 elections, that was the first time that they, they put it formally,
Yes.
any other fit and proper person.
Yeah.
That was added to the constitutional formula of President Jimmy Carter. And that is how, that was used, and Edward Hopkinson, a non-lawyer, non-judge, and not a former judge, was appointed. So we're going down the line.
Through the nomination.
Through the nomination
the then leader of
of the
opposition,
then
Mr.
leader
Hoyt.
of the opposition, Mr. Desmond Hoyt.
Right,
And then we come to the 97 elections now.
right.
In 1995, another amendment was made to the Constitution to make the commission this time a full-time commission.
Yes.
That was the important thing. And then also to put back the Carter formula with the two parcels of qualification.
Yeah.
The judge, former judge, legal, and person qualified to be a judge qualification, along with or any other fit and proper person qualification. And that was cemented in 1995 into the Constitution. And it has remained there since. It survived the constitutional reform process, and it was kept through that process. And today it is still the law. And for the 97 election, based upon a list submitted by leader of the opposition, Hoyt, President Jagan again appointed, this time, Do Not Sing. And then in 2000,
Who was a lawyer then?
who was a lawyer,
Yeah.
he happened to come into that category. Then in 2000, again Mr. Hoyt submitted a list, which this time contained Mr. Granger's name,
Yeah.
along with people like Jem Fletcher, Dennis Craig, Chief Justice retired Harper, and Joseph Singh. And from that list, President Jagdeo this time chose Joe Singh.
Yes.
And then in 2006, a similar list was submitted by leader of the opposition Hoyt again, just before he died. And from that list, President Jagdeo chose Steve Suraj Bali.
Right.
So you had Rudy Collins, Edward Hopkinson, I will skip Do Not Sing, Joe Singh, Steve Suraj Bali. All of them having no legal qualifications whatsoever. None of them were judges or former judges. Yet they were appointed to serve, and they were deemed qualified under the fit and proper category. This president, by rejecting the first list, firstly, he has etched his name in history as the first president to have rejected a list coming from the leader of the opposition.
Exactly.
And then he compounded the issue by the unfortunate remarks which he made at the media brunch Sunday at State House, to which you referred,
Yes.
where he conveyed the distinct impression that only one set of qualifications are provided for in the Constitution under Article 161(2), and that is that the person must be a judge, a former judge, or a person qualified to be a judge. He conveyed that distinct impression. He omitted to disclose that alongside those qualifications was a qualification that says, or any other fit and proper person. Subsequently, as a result of an avalanche of criticisms which came from us in particular, he got his Attorney General to come out and sought to clarify the issue. First thing the Attorney General did, and this is the first good thing he has done in a long while, is to concede that there is another category of qualifications, the any other fit and proper category.
Right.
They have since conceded that. But in attempting the clarification, Gail, the Attorney General, and I said characteristically, has added even more confusion to the issue. And this is what he has done now. He has said that it is the president who is to determine who is a fit and proper person. under the Constitution. That is not what the Constitution says. The Constitution says that the president must find the person acceptable.
Yeah.
The word acceptable is what applies to the president, not a fit and proper person. A fit and proper person, Gail, is a fit and proper person. A fit and proper person doesn't change like a chameleon.
Yeah.
He doesn't change his characteristic. It's an objective standard. And you have to assess it having regard to the circumstances and, for example, the office to which that person is going to function in.
Right.
For example, you have fit and proper, that terminology being used in many legislation around the world to deal with doctors and lawyers
Right.
who are to be admitted to practice in various jurisdictions. Apart from their legal qualifications or medical qualifications in the case of doctors, they are also additionally required to be fit and proper persons. And the courts have interpreted this thing
Yes.
and have said universally and consistently and uniformly that a fit and proper person is to be judged by an objective standard. For example, if in Bahamas there was a case and they had to determine a doctor as a fit and proper person, so he had the legal qualification, that is the first thing. So he satisfied the first aspect of the act.
He's a qualified doctor.
He's a qualified doctor. So he satisfied the medical requirements.
Right.
And then they had to examine what does fit and proper mean. And the judges in Bahamas refused to lay down any formula. They said fit and proper, you can't create an exhaustive list of qualities. But it has to do with, for example, things like, is he competent to discharge the functions of a doctor?
Right.
Is his integrity intact? Can he operate under pressure? Is he likely to discharge the ethical obligations that go with the profession? These are questions that determine whether a person fit and proper.
Right.
And then in Zimbabwe, I look at another case where a Rastafarian attempted to be admitted to the Zimbabwean bar. Of course, he satisfied the legal requirements. He was a lawyer, but he had dreadlocks. And the judge refused to register him as a lawyer because under their law, a judge has to register you
Right.
on the ground that he was unfit and improper because of his hair. And the Zimbabwean Supreme Court went at length to say that, look, this is an objective standard. This is not anybody's opinion.
Right.
This is not a judge's discretion to determine what is fit and proper. What is fit and proper is objective. And whether a person has dreadlocks or he has green eyes or blue eyes, those personal physical attributes have nothing to do with his suitability to perform the functions of the office for which he's applying for.
Right.
So those are the things. So when Mr. Williams is arguing that it is the president that has this power to determine fit and proper, he's wrong. The president has to determine acceptability and non-acceptability.
Right.
And even then, he has what is called a discretionary power, which the law says is never absolute. Every discretionary power, irrespective of how unfettered it may appear on its face, is circumscribed by law. It has to be exercised reasonably. It has to be exercised in a manner that a competent man in the circumstances would have exercised it. The person exercising the discretion must take into account reasonable, relevant considerations and not irrelevant considerations. So you don't reject a man because his eyes blue, because that is not a relevant consideration as to whether he can perform the
Or if
function.
he has a disability.
Or if it's a physical job, then maybe,
Yeah.
right? So this exercise of the power that the president has, this little power that he has to determine acceptability or non-acceptability, has also to be exercised within legal parameters, and it cannot be exercised irrationally and capriciously and arbitrarily. And that is why he has rejected persons who, by any standard, would be considered fit and proper.
Right.
So he should say, what are the reasons upon which he has found these 6 persons unacceptable? Because as I said, fit and proper is not a question for him. It's unacceptability. In fact, if anyone has a say in who is fit and proper, it is the leader of the opposition. Because it is he who is submitting a list of names that he deems to be fit and proper.
Right.
So if there is any subjectivity in it, the subjectivity goes towards the leader of the opposition and not the president. Because it's the leader of the opposition who is to compile the list. And therefore, it is persons who, in the opinion of the leader of the opposition, are going to be deemed fit and proper. Certainly not the president. So the president should say on what ground James Rose was unacceptable. On what ground Raihan Shah. On what ground Christopher Ram. Because all these persons are fit and proper persons.
But how do you deal with today's newspaper that says that, well, it's quoted, and I assume it's correct, from Kaicha News, saying that the president says that all along there was this breach of the Constitution. He won't tolerate it anymore. He won't allow it anymore. To some state press conference yesterday. I don't know if it's correctly reported. But
Two things quickly come to mind. Two
Right.
responses. One, the president is doing a great disrespect to his predecessor, Mr. Hugh Desmond Hoyt of Senior Counsel.
Yeah.
Mr. Desmond Hoyt distinguished himself at the bar even before he became a politician.
Yeah.
So no one can say that he got silk because of any political connection. He got silk even before I think we became independent. So Hoyt made a name for himself as a lawyer. And if you go into the law reports of Guyana, you will see the number of cases that Mr. Hoyt has argued.
Right.
So that Mr. Granger, by saying what he's saying, he is saying that Mr. Hoyt violated the Constitution. And it is wrong for him to say so.
Yeah.
He is not qualified to say so. Mr. Hoyt was a senior counsel, and Mr. Hoyt knows far more than him about the Constitution. If it was a military matter, then I would give Mr. Granger the edge. But Mr. Granger cannot arrogate unto himself superior legal knowledge over and above Mr. Desmond Hoyt. And the PNC rank and file would know that. So that was his first error. And secondly, Mr. Granger himself was among the list of names sent by Mr. Hoyt to President Jack Dale for the 2001 elections.
Yes.
Is the president now saying that he lent his name to a process that violated the Constitution? Because that is what he's saying now. And the third thing is, the president has to stop thinking that he has the power to determine what is constitutionally right or wrong, or what is legally right or wrong. That is not a function of the executive. He made the same error when he felt that the lease to Red House was unlawfully and illegally done.
Yeah.
That is a legal question that has to be answered by the court. Whether a matter is constitutional or unconstitutional, you can have a preliminary view, but you cannot speak conclusively on the matter unless the court determines that. So the president should go to court and ask the court to declare everything that happened before as unconstitutional. Fourthly, is the president now giving me a basis to go and challenge the 2015 elections on the ground that the chairman, Suraj Bali, was unconstitutionally appointed? Does he want me to unseat his government from power? Is he saying to the public that his government got into government through an unconstitutionally appointed chairman of the Elections Commission? The president has to be careful when he's making these statements. He's making statements that are way outside of his competence and reach. And I say so with the greatest of respect. I don't mean any disrespect to the president. But he is way outside when he keeps making conclusive pronouncements on legal matters which are for the judiciary to determine.
Right. But you know, outside of the leader opposition has written to the president calling for an urgent meeting. I think that letter went off on January the 10th. We haven't heard a response as yet. And so we anticipate, or we will wait to see whether the leader opposition will be invited to meet with the president. But clearly it's to discuss a different understanding of what the Constitution requires and to find a solution, or at least to have the president hear the leader opposition's position, our legal interpretation.
Because, Gail, the issue, first of all, let me say that I observed in the press information which supposed to have come from the office of the president, which says that the president will offer legal clarification or will facilitate the offering of legal clarification to the leader of the opposition. So
Right.
that's a good thing, and we
Right.
anxiously await that.
Right.
If not, then my advice to the leader of the opposition will be to submit the whole national register to the president and let him tick off a couple thousand names that he would find acceptable so that we can choose. Because unless we know, you get some idea, then we would be shooting in the dark. We would be sending lists from now until thy kingdom come without understanding what this president's expectations are, unless he gave us some indication. Because as I said, having rejected the first list, he has pushed the nation into uncharted waters.
Right.
So we are navigating here in a sea without a compass.
But is it possible, as what some people are afraid of or fearful of, that the other part of the same Article 161 that says if the leading opposition fails to provide this as provided for, that the president can go ahead and appoint someone, but that person must be a judge? Is the president getting these two clauses mixed up, or is it that this is a pretext? All of this is the precursor, the pretext, to allow him to finally and ultimately appoint the person of his choice and abandon the process which includes the leading opposition and a consultative process.
I have already said publicly that I do not rule out that this is part of an elaborate strategy that would conclude in the president conjuring up an interpretation which permits him to appoint unilaterally a person of his own choosing.
Right.
And I said also that this is the clearest signal that the 2020 elections,
2019 and
2019 and 2020 elections are not going to be free and fair.
Absolutely.
That the foundation of the rigging is being laid now. The Constitution says very clearly that once there is a list,
Yeah.
then the president cannot unilaterally appoint.
Right.
The president, and that is the intention also, even if it is not captured by the language, and I'm saying that it is captured by the language. But let us say people want to be ingenious and twist and turn the language. The spirit and intention of that proviso, that part of the article, was only in the event that there is no list.
Right.
Then obviously,
And that was put in basically because just in case the leading opposition
That's correct.
refuses to give a list,
Right.
you could have a crisis.
that's correct.
And that was a kind of fallback
Right.
for the president.
So it is only in that eventuality, when there is no list coming from the leader of
Right.
the opposition, and therefore the country can't grind to a halt without elections,
Right.
it is in that narrow context that the president has that special power to appoint unilaterally a person of his own choosing. And in that instance, his appointment is confined to a person who was a judge, is a judge, or is qualified to be a judge. Only in that narrow context.
But could we just remind our readers about it, our viewers about a number of things? One that some people raised several times in the call-ins, Anil, is our election petition. So in the context of what's happening now with the GECOM, with the whole process of the appointment of the chairman, we have one, the election petition still waiting to be heard. We have a decision in August 2016 by GECOM to hold a new house-to-house registration in 2017. The voters list has grown to 520,000 in a population of 747,000. And in fact, GECOM budgeted in their 2017 budget submissions to have a house-to-house registration. Cameras and all the paraphernalia and the hiring of enumerators. However, you remember when we were in Parliament, the government slashed the budget from 5 billion to 2 point something billion in Parliament, and thereby removed any possibility of holding new house-to-house registration. And they gave, remember, we had a question, were they to come back with a supplementary for house-to-house, would you support it? We asked Minister Jordan directly, and he said, we will consider that, and he laughed. So that you have that context of one, that's number one, petition. Two, the GECOM agreeing to have a house-to-house. It's almost 10 years since the last one, and we have an inflated list. Thirdly, Suraj Bali resigned with effect from November 30th. And this date is confirmed because I went back and checked the letter sent from the President to the Leader Opposition in November, seeking a list of 6 nominees in accordance with the Constitution. And that letter by the President says that Dr. Suraj Bali will resign with effect from November 30th, 2016, right? So how is it, Anil, that an order is signed for the 9th round of continuous registration, signed by Suraj Bali on December 29th, 2016, and gazetted? So is Suraj Bali there? Is he not there? Is it as the President said, when Suraj Bali in August talked about resigning, and then he said something else. Suraj Bali came on and said the President wants him to stay on until it's a transition, what do you call a smooth transition. That was August, September. Then you don't hear that. Then November 30th is the date that Suraj Bali is going. The newspaper covers it. Then suddenly you see a gazette dated December 29th, published with Suraj Bali's signature, saying that they're going to the 9th round of continuous registration on January the 16th. So who's running GECOM? A resigned chairperson is still there, or the secretariat headed by Lloyd Appeal, who is appealing once again the Chief Justice ruling to allow the election petition to proceed to be heard. And so these developments, what you have so well described for our viewers, because these legal arguments can be quite awesome sometimes, and I think you've been able to convey really well the complexity of this from a constitutional legal point of view. But the context is political, and therefore is the ground being prepared? You take away the house-to-house registration, you have a man hanging on there, which the public doesn't seem to know about, nor do we, and then all of a sudden you have now these rejections of the list. And therefore, the clear impression is that, one, the government is not in a hurry to replace the chairman, because if they've got Mr. Suraj Bali in some kind of hold me, loose me limbo situation, where I'm sure he's being paid there, the commission isn't meeting. Commissioners are not being called to meetings. So, in other words, they have the best of both worlds. They don't have to, they can hold off and keep detained.
But
and
Gail, they're serious.
The chairman, it's terrible. No, these are, I'm talking from a political expedient, pragmatic, but it's dangerous for politics and dangerous to democracy, obviously.
And it is illegal.
Yes.
If the chairman of the Elections Commission is a constitutional office holder, he is appointed by instruments.
Right.
Those instruments are terminated, and therefore his authority ends, his constitutional authority ends upon the termination of those instruments. One of the method by which those instruments are going to lose their life is if he tenders a resignation.
Yeah.
Once he tenders that resignation, and the resignation is not rejected,
Right.
then that is the end of his tenure. He has to be reappointed
Right, under the constitutional
under
process.
the Constitution
Same
to
constitutional
continue
process.
to function.
Yes.
So unless the president has secretly rejected his resignation,
But then why
and
would
we
you write a
don't
letter
know.
to
That's
Mr.
correct.
Jagdeo that with effect from November 30th,
Right.
Suraj Bali is not going to be there, is resigning. Therefore, I'm calling on you to implement or to provide lists according to so-and-so Article 161(2) of the Constitution.
So
He invited.
Mr. Suraj Bali is unlawfully detaining the office of chairman of the Elections Commission. And that is a serious constitutional and administrative law wrong. He's holding that office without authority. He's spending money. I hope Dr. Suraj Bali knows what he's doing. He's spending money, state funds, without authority. He's a trespasser in that office.
I don't even know if he's in the office. All I know is he signed a
But
order.
if he signs that
assume
order-
that means he's executing the office, even if he's not physically in the office.
And if he signs that order flows from a nullity. Anything that comes from a nullity is going to be a nullity. So that order is going to be unlawful and a nullity. So we have some more serious
Yeah.
legal issues that are arising and that are being condoned either by action or by omission by the government.
Right.
We would have never tolerated this kind of thing
Right.
were we in the seat of executive government. And then you have the elections petition on the other hand
Right.
that is being delayed, not by the political parties anymore, now by GECOM.
Yeah.
And as I have said, GECOM has a constitutional role in the electoral machinery. They are the impartial body to drive the election machinery forward. And and if questions are asked or elections petitions are filed, GECOM is named as a party, not as a combatant,
Yeah.
but as a facilitator
Yeah.
of the process of the litigation. Because at the end of the day, GECOM is the custodian of all the records that will have to be
And also the
evidenced in the
Constitution gives the
petition.
responsibility to manage and maintain
In an impartial manner.
and integrity of the electoral process, no matter what their views are.
So I have, as lawyer for the petitioner, the unprecedented and unholy task of battling with GECOM. And I brought GECOM in because by law I am to bring them in because they are there, they are the custodian of all the documents, they have the evidence that I need, and I brought them in to facilitate the process. They have now become my most potent combatant against me.
Yeah.
So now they attempted to strike out the petition, they lost, and they have appealed.
Yeah.
So we are now at the stage of dealing with the appeal of their attempt to strike out the petition. The end of the day, all of this is causing a detention of the petition from being heard. And that is what, so you see, there are a series of things that are happening
Yeah.
that one needs to put the dot on
Exactly.
and cross the T's.
Yeah.
You have this now going on with GECOM, with GECOM chairman appointment. You have no money being put by the government to reform
Right.
the electoral register and to rectify it and to continue the cycle, etc., as is required by law. And we are arguing for a new list, and why would anyone not want to have a new list?
Yeah. The last one was 2008.
is exactly.
It's 8 years old.
So it's 8 years old, and they are not giving money for that. So, Gail, we have to be frank with the Guyanese people and tell them to be vigilant and to observe and recognize that the foundations are being laid
Yeah.
for 2020. And we are not saying so to scare anybody, but we are saying so that we can begin a process to stop that from happening.
Yeah.
We have to internationalize it, of course, but the international community would more readily come in and intervene if the foundation is laid locally and the momentum begins locally. And that is why I want a national conversation to begin about the possibility of rigging of the 2019 and 2020 elections, because you're seeing the writing on the wall, and we have to begin the struggle to guard against it now.
Okay, well, I know that people have been calling in and want to get in to make some comments. We only have a few minutes left. I'll take as many calls as I can. Hello, good afternoon, and welcome to Matters of Public Importance.
Hello, good afternoon. I was listening to you all with interest, right?
Thank
Let
you.
me tell you something. Anybody in this country would prefer live under a rigged system than under the PPP. I tell you. Trust you.
Thank you for calling. Hello, good afternoon, welcome to Matters of Public Importance.
Good afternoon.
Yes, welcome.
I would like to have a few say. I think Mr. Patel Williams should go back to law school. He's misleading his president and also the nation. Right?
Yes, go ahead, call it. Go ahead.
That man, I don't know. I see they're setting up a law school. He should enroll. Right? Because this man, even in the Rodney Commission, they realized how to operate it about his conduct. Right? And I think he's misleading Mr. Granger, who seems to be a football. Right? The finance minister kick him in one side, Pastor William kicking him in the next side. So I think, they should resign. Right? I think that these people, all the races are fed up with it. Right?
Okay.
And I must thank Mr. Anil Nandlall very much
Thank you.
for enlightening the nation about all the crookedness they are up in.
Well, I'm glad you listened to our program and you're keeping in touch with what's going on.
Yes.
And we
yes.
hope that the program helps people to understand, because sometimes there are many layers in relation to an issue, and we look at it and we bring in different comrades from the PPP to help you to understand them. Of course, you make your own decisions, and
Yes.
one of the issues too that this program tries to appeal to everyone, whether they voted for PPP or APNU AFC, that they have a moral and civic duty in terms of democracy and fighting for the development of our nation, so that particularly those who were sympathetic to APNU AFC voted, that they have a special, we're calling on them, encouraging them to speak to their leaders, to their ministers, to the members of parliament of the APNU AFC, to stop going down this path, because it will take us into authoritarianism, it will take us into very dangerous waters. We've been through this before long years ago, and we really don't want to have to see our democracy, our gains that we made. And even President Obama last night in his final speech, I think it was last night, yes? Night before, was saying that, the American people must guard their democracy. Well, we have to guard our democracy. It's our democracy is embryonic. It's only 20 odd years old, but nevertheless, every one of us, whoever we voted for, no matter where we live, because in the end, what is going down now is going to really affect everybody in terms of their rights and so on.
Yes. Also, I would like to add, I think the party,
Yes.
as he is Mr. Anil Nandlall, have that responsibility in the past Congress period. To get, overseas bodies, make them aware of all these things. Because I can remember Dr. Chetty Jagan went to Canada, America, and
Right.
a lot of countries, India and so on, and let the bodies, all the United
Yeah,
Nations
that's why I
and so on.
said we are internationalizing it,
Yes.
right? And we are going to travel overseas as well and resuscitate all those groups and movements that were there that assisted so immeasurably
Yes.
in getting observers and these reforms to take place to bring us into democracy before 92.
Okay, thank you
Yes,
very much.
yes.
I
Also, one more other point is,
lost lick, huh?
yeah.
There are other people waiting on the phone.
all right, I'll go. Good.
Okay, we'll call next week, because next week we're going to be talking about all these taxation measures, which I know some of you want to have a more detailed explanation of these taxes, which you're going to be confronted with. And of course, I think by the time next week, it'll just be on the eve of the parking meters coming into operation. So good afternoon. Welcome to Matters of Public Importance. Hello.
Good afternoon.
Yes, good afternoon. Can you hear me?
I enjoy the program.
Yes, good.
Chapter 161, why do I say that storage manager remove from there?
Yeah, well, we thought he was he was gone, and now he's signing documents. So we thought he was resigned as of November 30th.
But what about the president signed? He should already remove from there.
Well, I agree.
You agree with that?
Yes.
Yeah, yeah.
Yes, caller.
Okay.
All right.
Okay, thank you.
Very much, and you have a good afternoon.
Okay, thank you.
Our democratic rights are violated in this country.
Yes.
You know that, ma'am?
Yes, we know. That's why we have this program. We're trying to explain to people, talk to people, so people will be well informed and have courage to stand up and speak well informed in a well informed way.
I know you really went to Caracas. I live in Caracas. I've got massive Guyana. I can't get current where I live.
You can't get what? Electricity?
Electricity, ma'am.
Uh-huh.
I live in a place that's called Orange State, Puerto Rico.
Oh, dear.
And I went to the minister.
Uh-huh.
I went to David Patterson. And I can't get electricity. 1 year now.
Oh, my goodness. You applied? You applied with GPL and you still can't get?
No, ma'am, I can't pay for me.
All right, look.
Why don't you come around by the...
Come and visit us at the leader of the opposition office, and we will dispatch. Yes,
Yeah.
at Church Street.
304
Okay, ma'am.
Church Street between New Garden and
ma'am.
Peter Rose. Okay?
Thank you very much, ma'am.
Okay, bye-bye. Take care.
Bye-bye. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Okay, thank you very much. I'm being told I have 60 seconds left. So, Anil, I don't know if you want to say a couple of words before we close off, before I then make the final closure.
I want to say to the members of the public that we are dealing here not with issues of party politics.
No.
We are dealing with issues that go far beyond this. When a government goes into a dictatorship mode, it means that the government doesn't depend upon you, the people, to stay in office. And when that happens, then the government is not answerable to you. And they can do what they wish, and they can do you what they wish. And that is the direction in which we are going as a country. And all of us have a duty to arrest this downslide. So I ask you to be vigilant and to pay attention to what is going on, and we have to start the struggle now to stop it from sliding further.
Okay, thank you very much, Anil, for coming on the program. And thank you, our viewers, for listening to us. These developments that we pointed out, particularly those that have emerged in the last 2 weeks, are ominous. And when one adds to that the pattern of government that we've seen in the last 19 months, and what my colleague Damon, Member of Parliament, calls the APNU AFC I Don't Care government, we as a people are really at a serious crossroads. And it is our moral and our civic duty to, as citizens, to protect and guard the democracy, embryonic as it is, emerging as it is in the last 20-odd years. Because without the fundamental ingredient for development is democracy. You can't have development without democracy, and therefore what we're seeing is an authoritarianism growing within this government that is very disturbing and makes everyone, whether they voted APNU or voted AFC or voted PPP, very uncomfortable. But for those in the PPP who've gone through the long struggle with many other progressive people to be able to have free and fair elections, we really would hate to think that Guyana has to traverse that road again, and therefore we have a moral and civic duty to not be silent. Silence allows authoritarianism to grow. Silence allows people to believe they can be bullies and get their way. Silence believes, as the Minister Jordan seems to believe, that you take it or leave it. And therefore, it is in our using our right to speak, express ourselves and express our opinions to ensure that our democracy is not eroded further than it is right now. So We will see each other next Thursday, and as I said, next Thursday we'll talk about some of the taxation issues, which I know you want to know about, and any further development on the matters we've dealt today, as usual. As usual, don't drink and drive. We want all of you safe and sound. The road fatalities rates have gone up extraordinarily last year, and we want everybody, we're a small population, to be alive and kicking and working towards making sure that we have free and fair elections in 2019 and 2020. So take care of yourselves. Have a blessed week. I will meet again on Thursday at 12:30 next week. Bye-bye.